A question that should have taken 5 seconds suddenly froze the entire room. Not because it was complicated, not because it required classified clearance, but because the Attorney General refused to say who gave the order. And when the nation's top law enforcement official won't identify the person who told investigators to flag a specific name inside the Epstein files, you're not looking at a paperwork issue anymore. You're staring straight at a system that treats accountability like a threat. That's where this story begins. One unanswered question, one uncomfortable silence, and a hearing that spiraled into something far bigger than a fight over documents.
In February, you made a public claim that the Epstein client list was, quote, sitting on my desk right now for review, end of quote. You then produced already public information and no client list at a major media event hosted at the White House. Attorney General Bondi, why did you publicly claim to have the Epstein client list waiting for your review and then produce nothing relevant to that claim?
Senator Durbin, if you listen to my entire clip on that, I said I had not reviewed it yet, that it was sitting on my desk along with the JFK files, the Martin Luther King files, and I said I had not yet reviewed it. And if you see our memo on Epstein, you will see, excuse me, our memo on Epstein clearly points out that there was no client list, our July 6th memo. You also didn't let me respond to the HIDTA question. The budget transfers $196 million for high-intensity drug trafficking areas to the Office of Justice Programs, OJP. The Justice Department will continue to administer those grants under OJP in 2026.
Going back to the Epstein files, according to another whistleblower who made a protected disclosure to my office, you pushed the FBI to review approximately 100,000 Epstein-related records on an arbitrarily short deadline in March, and the FBI was directed to flag any documents that mentioned President Trump. Nothing came of that review until July when DOJ and FBI released an unsigned memo stating, quote, there's no incriminating client list. Why was the July 7th memo unsigned?
The July 7th memo came from the FBI and the Department of Justice. Director Patel answered those questions very clear. And, you know, Senator Durbin, I find it very interesting that you refused repeated Republican requests to release the Epstein flight logs in 2023 and 2024. You fought that. Did you take money from Reid Hoffman, campaign donations, who was a huge Epstein friend? Why did you fight for years? Why did you fight to not disclose the flight logs, Senator Durbin?
I can tell you I did not refuse. One of the senators here wished to produce those logs, and I asked her to put it in writing, and she never did.
Yeah, I think Senator Blackburn would quarrel with you on that.
Well, I will quarrel with you as to Reid, somebody that you mentioned I never heard of.
Reid Hoffman.
So who gave the order to flag records related to President Trump?
To flag records for President Trump?
To flag any records which included his name.
I'm not going to discuss anything about that with you, Senator.
Eventually, you're going to have to answer for your conduct in this. And you won't do it today, but eventually you will. I yield, Mr. Chairman.
I got
Mr. Chairman.
something here.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, since Senator Durbin referred to me, I would really appreciate the opportunity to correct the record.
Proceed.
Because Senator Durbin knows I repeatedly asked for those flight logs. I brought up the subpoena. You even shut down the committee because you didn't want that, and you know I submitted that in writing, and you continue to misrepresent that, and I am not going to let that record stand.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Senator Durbin.
I just want to make it clear that the reason the committee business ended was that your side invoked the 2-hour rule. Point number 2 is I asked you if you wanted any documents like flight logs to put it in writing. You never.
Because what unfolded wasn't just a clash of personalities. It was a rare moment where every crack in the machinery of power became visible at once. And for the first time, viewers watching understood how fragile transparency really is inside the institutions meant to enforce the law. The moment the question was asked, the tone of the hearing changed. The ranking senator leaned forward, voice steady but sharp, demanding clarity. who ordered investigators to flag one particular individual's name when reviewing roughly 100,000 Epstein-related documents. The Attorney General didn't blink. She didn't pause. She simply refused. "I'm not going to discuss that," she said, repeating the phrase like a shield. No explanation. No legal justification. No acknowledgement that it wasn't just a refusal, it was a signal. A message that the process itself was now off limits for public view. And suddenly the entire hearing turned from oversight into obstruction, because the question wasn't about guilt, innocence, or even the content of the records. It was about who made a procedural decision. Someone somewhere made that call. Someone decided that one name in particular needed to be tagged, highlighted, separated from the mass of data. Naming that official would reveal the chain of authority. And refusing to name them raises a simple but unavoidable question. Why? But the stunning part is that this wasn't the first question she refused to answer that day. In fact, the pattern began long before the topic of Epstein even came up. It started when the senator asked something entirely different: whether she had spoken with the White House before National Guard troops were deployed into states whose governors never asked for them. That question didn't require details about operations or confidential strategy. It only required an acknowledgement that a conversation either did or didn't take place. She refused. Again, instead, she pivoted to crime statistics, personal insults, and political jabs. She went after Chicago, criticized the senator personally, and accused him of hating the president more than he loved his own state. It was the kind of response designed to derail accountability by replacing it with confrontation. And if you weren't watching closely, you might think the argument was about crime rates or partisanship. But the real issue was something far more fundamental. If the Attorney General won't say whether the White House told her to deploy federal troops into a state without permission, how is Congress supposed to determine whether the Constitution was followed? That was only the beginning. The senator moved to a completely different topic: the acceptance of a $400 million luxury jet from a foreign royal family as a temporary Air Force One before being permanently donated to a presidential foundation. The Constitution is crystal clear. Congress, not the executive branch, controls whether U.S. officials can accept gifts from foreign rulers. So the senator asked the obvious question: did the Attorney General consult the Ethics Office before advising the president on whether accepting the jet was legal? She refused again. She said the Office of Legal Counsel was involved, but insisted everything was confidential. But ethics consultations aren't classified battlefield briefings. They're normal procedural checks. And refusing to confirm whether one was even made doesn't protect national security. It protects ambiguity. It creates fog. It prevents Congress from knowing whether the law was followed or whether it was simply bypassed. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. Months earlier, the Attorney General publicly stated that the Epstein client list was sitting on my desk right now. That sentence ignited media firestorms, fueled speculation online, and created the expectation that something meaningful was about to be revealed. And yet, when the Department of Justice finally released documents months later, what came out wasn't new evidence. It wasn't a list. It wasn't anything close to what the public had been led to believe. Instead, they released an unsigned memo. No signature, no name, no accountable official taking responsibility for its conclusions. The memo declared that no incriminating client list exists. But without a signature, you can't determine who wrote it, who approved it, or who reviewed the underlying data. An unsigned memo in government is like a blank return address on a package. It tells you nothing about the sender and gives you nowhere to send questions back. That's why the senator pushed hard, because in government, signatures are everything. They tell Congress who stands behind an analysis, who conducted the review, and who can be held accountable if the reasoning falls apart. Without that, there's no chain of responsibility. And without a chain of responsibility, there's no oversight. It's like trying to audit a building without knowing who the architect was. But the moment that turned the hearing electric was when the senator referenced a protected whistleblower disclosure. This wasn't rumor. This wasn't speculation. This was a formal statement submitted legally to Congress. According to this whistleblower, FBI personnel were instructed to comb through roughly 100,000 Epstein-related documents under an extremely tight deadline. And during that review, they were specifically directed to flag any records containing a particular name. Again, flagging a name isn't evidence of wrongdoing. It's a sorting mechanism. But ordering investigators to spotlight one person's name and refusing to explain who gave that order creates a vacuum that suspicion rushes into. If the process were routine, there'd be no reason not to say who authorized it. If it were neutral, transparency would strengthen public trust. Instead, silence clouded everything around it. And that's the moment the Attorney General snapped back, not with an explanation, but with an attack. She accused the senator of previously blocking the release of Epstein flight logs, implying hypocrisy. The senator denied it and cited procedural letters and written requests. Then another senator jumped in, arguing she had submitted requests in writing that were ignored. Suddenly, the chamber degenerated into finger-pointing, procedural disputes, and personal grievances. But if you stepped back from the chaos, you'd notice something important. The topic had shifted away from the unanswered question and toward fights about old requests, campaign donations, and crime rates. These deflections weren't mistakes. They were tactics, ways to avoid the central issue by burying it under noise. The real issue wasn't flight logs or who said what in previous years. It was the Attorney General's refusal to answer three core questions. Did you consult the White House before deploying federal troops into states that didn't request them? Did you consult the Ethics Office before approving a foreign luxury jet gift? Who ordered investigators to flag one specific name in the Epstein files? Every refusal weakened the structure of oversight. And that's what the senator was trying to reveal. Not a headline, not a scandal, but a pattern. A governing philosophy where transparency becomes optional and accountability becomes negotiable. Where oversight hearings turn into performance battles instead of legal examinations. You could see the tension building in the room as it became clear that the Attorney General didn't intend to acknowledge any procedural flaw or admit any deviation from normal process. She wasn't there to explain. She was there to defend. She was there to counterpunch. And in her view, answering basic oversight questions wasn't part of the job. But for the senator, it was everything. Because the Department of Justice isn't like other agencies. It has the unique responsibility of enforcing the law without fear or favor. It exists to police the powerful as much as the powerless. And when that department refuses to answer procedural questions, it signals something dangerous, not about any one individual, but about the institution itself. That if transparency depends on political convenience, then oversight becomes meaningless. And when oversight becomes meaningless, power becomes immune. That's why the senator ended the exchange with a line that didn't sound loud, but landed like a warning. Eventually, you're going to have to answer for your conduct in this. He didn't shout it. He didn't threaten. He stated a fact. Because oversight hearings create a public record. They document every refusal, every contradiction, and every deflection. And those records don't disappear when the cameras turn off. They become the starting point of future investigations. And that's what makes this hearing so important. Not the drama, not the shouting, not the personal jabs. What matters is the record, the pattern of refusal, the unanswered questions, the withheld information, the procedural fog surrounding decisions that should be transparent. Because this story isn't about who appeared in which document. It's about who controlled the process, who made decisions behind closed doors, who is shielding those decisions today, and why the top law enforcement official in the country is unwilling to disclose the simplest procedural facts to the public. If you want more deep dive breakdowns that cut through the noise, explain the real power dynamics, and bring clarity to stories others gloss over, make sure to subscribe, hit the like button, and turn on notifications. There's a lot more coming, and the next chapter in this fight for transparency is only getting louder.